Okay. Hi everyone. Um okay, can everyone see me right now? Let's see. Okay. Okay. I'm seeing in the chat. Okay. Okay, sorry. My Twitch is lagging. I only have one screen, so I'm like viewing the chat and everything on my phone. So, sorry. Also, I've never streamed before, so please bear with me. But hi, thank you so much for coming. Welcome to my apartment in Brooklyn, and I'm so excited. So thank you, Bitbird, for having me to chat about, my work and working with Bitbird generally. Um, so yeah, thanks everyone who's writing into the chat. I'm gonna hopefully be able to see the chat on my phone, and we're gonna make it work. So I'm just gonna open a couple things here, and I'll definitely be asking you guys for help like along the way. So yeah. Okay. Um okay. So again, hi everyone. My name is Ronnie Ahlborn. I realize I didn't introduce myself actually, but my um I'm a digital artist, and basically that means I have my own practice, and I do my own studio practice in the digital medium, and then additionally, I work as a freelance graphic artist for different projects, just like I work for Bitbird and work to make visuals for musicians. So, if you want to follow me, this is my Instagram. We can talk a little bit on how I got here. Basically, for the stream today, I'm just going to talk a little bit about me and like my creative practice and my process and how my work has developed over time to get to my current style and like general visual language that I use. Um, and then we're also going to talk about how I used that to create visuals for Bitbird, specifically for Nikita the Wicked. And yeah, so that is how we are going to be going through today. So background is, like I was a really artsy kid. I drew on the walls. I went to art camps, like all those things. And then I got pretty involved in drawing. I went to a very like arts focused K through 12 school. Um, and I got pretty involved in drawing in high school. And here's just some of the drawings I made when I was like 16 years old. But I had such an amazing drawing teacher when I was in high school. He really pushed me conceptually, and really what he did was kind of let my ideas run free and just like try things, even if they're wacky or like maybe didn't turn out the best. Like I really just was producing crazy stuff, and I got into this idea of distorting reality. And this is basically the main takeaway from this time. And like the beauty of being 16 years old is that you get to try, and you know, a lot of things don't work out that great in art. And one of the ideas that still is very prevalent in my work now is this idea of distorting reality. And so I'm going to maybe repeat myself a little bit throughout this process, but just to kind of show how, even though my work appears very all over the place, there is like some through line on how paths have led me to where I am currently. So I went to college for studio art, um, and I was involved in all of the different mediums in studio art. Um, they, the department in my college took a very like broad approach, and this is a picture of me in my parents' basement in spring 2020, because obviously I was taking class remotely. And when it came time for me to do a painting final, There was like an extra door in my parents' basement from when they bought the house because it was too skinny to fit anywhere, like in any of the doorways. So it was just a spare. And so I painted on it. I decided to do a reflection of like what the windows of the door would look like reflected on the outside, like when the sun is setting, and then also if it was light out and you could look inside, what you would see on the 3 floors of the house, like the basement, the first floor, and the second floor. And basically, oh wait, someone said if you go to the stream URL and add /chat on your phone, you'll only see the chat. Okay, maybe I'll do that. Sorry. Actually, you know what? Never mind. Anyways, what was I gonna say? This kind of took the idea of distorting reality and took it one step further of literally painting reality, because I'm taking a door and I'm painting it the color of a door, and I'm painting the outside the color of what the windows would look like, and I'm painting the inside what the windows would look like, you know, if it was dark out versus if it was light out. It's like bringing the physical object into a different alternative state. Another thing that I learned in this process was that if I create work that is very personal to me, for example, about my family, I'm just so much more motivated and proud of the work that comes out. And that also was a very important lesson for me. Some drawings I also made during college. The prompt for this project was to show like growth and decay, or like show something that grows and decays. I decided to do myself because the human person is very complex and like isn't just growing or decaying. You're usually doing both at the same time. So I took this like self-portrait of me and used these blobs to show like smaller or bigger in terms of like growing or decaying. And that's what all of these are. Again, showing something personal, distorting reality. I also started taking some sculpture classes, which were very humbling and eye-opening. I had never worked like in the 3 dimensions before, and also with gravity, and like, you know, the physical limitations of materials. I had been pretty used to imagining something in my head and being able to just create it by drawing it, and I think that's why I always stuck with drawing as a medium, because it was just such a literal translation for me. It's like I have an idea and I can just put it down. And this made me realize that there's a lot of other steps in between, and like learning how to just have an idea in my head and then like try and make it exist in the 3 dimensions of the physical world was something I was not used to. And it was very, very helpful for me. And this will come around into how you can create things 3D in 3D through your 2D computer screen, which is a very weird thing to think about. But this helped me a lot. And this is the final I did for that class. Again, distorting reality. It's similar to the door in taking a physical thing that exists in the physical world and kind of bringing it into another alternative dimension. So like I made this Dr. Seussian type looking growth that is coming off of this tree. Yeah. I kind of continued this with drawing and painting as well. I believe my prompt for this project was to paint on like a non-neutral ground, like emotionally non-neutral. So I did a mirror because no one thinks neutral thoughts when they look in a mirror. But basically, the reason why I decided to show this is because it's also getting at the idea of there being like 2 realities, the way I photographed it, with the leaves and the sky, and the orange and the blue exaggerates the idea of there being the mirrored reality and the reality behind it. And I left the hole in the middle to show that they're not just like two separate things, but they're fluid and they're intertwined. Um, so yeah, then I did this painting. I'm just gonna make sure. Sorry, I feel like I'm maybe going too fast, but I'm gonna see if I can do the chat thing. Okay, maybe I did it, maybe I didn't. Okay, sorry. Anyways, the reason why I'm showing this painting, this is a big painting that I did when I was in college, and the reason why I'm showing this is because, oh, thank you for whoever did this, and for helping me so much on this, but I do see the chat now, so thank you. But the reason why I included this work in this presentation is because this was a very important work for me in honing my process a little bit more and having a creative process with a bit more intention and working less whimsically, and kind of just like, that's what I was saying, you know, I was doing a lot in high school, like just trying things out, seeing what was interesting to me. And this painting, it's really big and it's oil, and the pressure of like adding lines to a painting this big and that took me this long was kind of what I needed to make me really, really think about each step carefully. And also, I needed that general intervention in my creative process. So yeah, this is like some pictures from the process. I decided to take some of the like digital skills that I had learned along the way, which I'm going to get into the digital part in a second, I promise. But I decided to take that and use that to create different iterations of things for me along the way. And I realized that I love working iteratively. I love being able to do this or that. Do I like this more than that? As opposed to just, do I like this, yes or no? That is very helpful for me. So each step along the way, I would take a picture of it, put it into Photoshop, try a few things out. You know, you can like add paintbrushes and stuff on Photoshop. And yeah, I actually had it at like this orientation for a long time, and then I decided to change it. And this is what I ended up with. So it is a self-portrait. It is personal to me. But it is more about the process in this one. Okay, the reason why I decided to include this work is because this work got me thinking about the idea of unraveling a universe. So basically, this is a big drawing, but I was living in a house with 13 other girls this summer that I was making this. And what I decided to do was to draw little vignettes from different parts of the house and kind of unravel them. So it's like we have this own little universe, our house, and I'm kind of flattening that universe out, even if like physically it doesn't make that much sense. You have the outside of the house, you have the mailbox, then you have the inside, then you have the roof. Like, that doesn't make sense, but it's the idea of there being like this private thing going on that can be completely flattened out. And then also the idea of it all being connected. In this case, I literally connected it through the lines and the color. Okay, so then I learned how to use my computer to make art. I took this like graphic design class, and you know, I learned like Illustrator, Photoshop, things like that. This was the first real project I made where I took old family photos and collaged them onto new family photos. That's like my baby picture on the right and my parents' wedding on the left. But this was very important for me in just understanding like how to use a computer to create art. After this, class, I immediately went on to work as a graphic designer and continued to work as a graphic designer forever until now. So this was very, very valuable for me. Then I took it a step further and I learned how to make 3D digital modeling. So now we can talk about that a little bit more. But I took a 3D digital modeling class and I made this recreation of my bedroom at the time. And I spent so much time on this, but it was really, really fun. It was kind of the complete culmination of everything that I've been talking about so far with like the working in 3D, the color, the process, like it all just worked. It all just worked. And I thought it was so much fun. Here's another angle here. And I also was working on my animation at the time. Here's just like a little thing from a video I made in this room that I made as well. Okay, so now we can talk more on like what is 3D modeling. So, sorry. Okay, so now you should be able to see my Maya. This is Maya, Maya. It is the software that I use. It's also the software that a lot of like big animation companies use and stuff. And this is what it looks like when you open it. So we are looking at a 2D plane to realize that we are in a 3D world. Also, definitely use a 3-button mouse if you are using Maya. Having the center button helps a lot. I mean, you can do it on your iPad, on your trackpad, but it's just like, it gets more confusing. It helps when you can like physically move the mouse around because you're physically moving around like in all these dimensions. It gets a little bit complicated. The other thing is that Maya is pretty expensive. Yeah, whoever said center button is so useful, yes, like get a 3-button mouse. I got mine, like mine has a cord attached, like it's not fancy at all. It was so cheap, it's probably like $10. What was I gonna say? Oh, Maya is pretty expensive, but I recently found out like a couple years ago that there's Maya Indie, and it's for independent artists, and you can get it at a hugely discounted rate. So if you want to try Maya, I definitely recommend looking at Maya Indie. And also, I'm only very lightly going to go into the technical aspects of Maya today, but speak generally more on a conceptual level and how you can use 3D modeling to achieve, you know, what you're seeing in your head, your ideas. To learn more technical aspects, there's a million YouTube videos out there. That is how I've learned basically everything. So definitely recommend that as well. Yeah, so in general, when I'm speaking about 3D modeling, what I'm speaking about is like basically sculpting out of digital clay. So for example, I do poly modeling, which is modeling from polygons, which basically means like you're starting with a big chunk of clay, and you can take this chunk of clay and you can make it bigger, you can make it longer, you can make it fatter, skinnier. You can look at it from every single angle and make sure it looks the way you want. You can make basically anything you want out of these very, very simple objects. So I could take this tool and make more edges. The lines are called edges. Where they meet are called vertices, and then the surface area in between is called a face. And you can just grab the face and you can just extrude it, and you can make whatever shapes you want. You can do literally anything. You can also grab a face and you can rotate it, or you can grab an edge and you can move it. And so generally, this is what 3D modeling is. You can look at it from all angles, and You can smooth it out. You can make it pointy. In the most basic level, that's what 3D modeling is. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about dreams, which is what this whole stream is based on. And hopefully my repetitive spiel through my work up until the point of this project will make it make sense as to how I landed here. But basically, when I was a senior in college, I was looking to come up with what I wanted my capstone project to be. And around the same time, my parents were moving out of my childhood home. And I came home to pack up my bedroom, and I came across some of my old dream journals from high school. And I have always had very vivid dreams, and I've always remembered them. And I've always also taken an interest in remembering them and writing them down and telling people about them or telling them to myself. And I'd never used it as any type of inspiration for my work, and it was almost like such an aha moment for me of finding these dream journals right at this time when I was looking to embark on like a more serious long-term project. I was just like, this seems like the right answer. This is personal to me. This distorts reality. It kind of was in line with everything I was doing that so far. It just made sense to me. So then, I started up my dream journals again. I started writing them down every morning. And then that started like not doing it for me. So what I started doing was doing voice recordings in the morning instead. And the reason why I say it wasn't doing it for me is because when you write down a dream, you're already pretty awake because you're awake enough to have a pen in your hand and be writing down complete sentences, and at least that's the way I would do it. But also at that point you're in this physical universe. You are in this reality, and you're remembering a time from a different reality, and you're viewing it through the lens of the physical reality that you are in, and therefore passing judgment. So like, when people will recall a dream, they'll say things like, and for some reason that guy was there, and I don't know why, but we decided to do this, and like things like that. But when I speak, like literally it would be like I would turn off my alarm, go into voice memos, and just start talking. And when I would do that, first of all, I sound crazy. Like I'm not gonna play one of these, but I'm like fully half asleep, and I just am so convinced that like everything I'm talking about is the truth, and like everything is matter of fact, and there's no judgment or confusion in my voice. It's like period. And that made me start viewing my dreams in a very different way as to when I would just write them down later in the day, because I felt like I was like talking or like hearing another person, but it was me. But I'm just so convinced as to like everything that happened was real. So later in the day, what I do is I do listen to it, and then I transcribe it, and then I also, when I'm hearing it back, everything comes back to me. Like I can see everything again. It's just like, when you're walking around and you see something and you're like, oh, I dreamed about that. Like it all comes back as you hear it. So I make some drawings. I also make some notes to myself. And then I started getting a little bit more sophisticated in fleshing out these things from my dreams, like with color, and just understanding like really visually what they are. And then I made one that was like of this tower. I had this dream that I had to like race to the top of the tower. And about a week later, I made this drawing. I had this dream that I was like bleeding from both knees. And a week later, I made that. And then I hung them both up in my studio like this. And this was a huge aha moment for me. Also, then I went in and painted the backgrounds blue, and I changed the color of the liquid to match, and I made it look like more of a complete piece. It didn't make as much sense at the beginning, but this was a really important moment for me because I had all these drawings. I wasn't creating them into like digital things yet. I was not at that step yet. I was just drawing them, and I didn't know what to do with them. But piecing them together like this, it helped me realize that I didn't want to just like recreate my dreams, but I wanted to recreate the universe that's going on inside my head. And this is again going back to that drawing that I was talking about of the house that I lived in, and kind of taking a universe and flattening it. Like these are two separate scenes from two separate dreams, but in my head they're all the same thing because they can appear at any time in my head. So this is actually goes back to a note that I wrote in my dream journal where I wrote, a dream is a combination of all your personal worlds, the environments, and the people. It makes sense in a dream that they would all go together, even though they don't really know each other. But this is the world as it exists to me if the world revolved around me. And so that's how you can end up with, you know, that's how I end up with my best friend from preschool and, someone that works at my coffee shop. And like the three of us are running around like we're best friends because in my head, everything goes together. So this was a very important moment for me. Okay, so why did I decide to pursue this work through 3D modeling? Because using this room that I did as an example, I really, really liked that I could take something that exists in the world and make it look real, but not really that real. Like, you don't look at this and necessarily think this is a picture of my room because there's something off about it. Like, something makes you think it's a cartoon. And it makes you realize that this isn't reality, but maybe you have like a little moment of pause or like you wonder why it's not reality, which is exactly what happens with a dream. And then I also liked that you could take one world, you could create a 3D world, and then you could capture different vignettes within that world, as we were talking about before. And it also really easily allowed for like repetition of motifs throughout, an entire body of work. You're able to create one model of something and then use it throughout different works very easily, which I'm going to go into a little bit on like how I organize my files and everything in a little bit. But yes. Okay. So then I finally took one of these drawings and I turned it into a 3D model. I had this dream about like an octagonal pool with a green rim. Wanted to make it look a little bit dreamlike. Added these checkers. And that was step one. Then I did the same thing with another object I had in a dream and another object I had in a dream, and I was finally ready to combine them to create this universe that I'd been hoping to create, and this is what I ended up with. So I had that pool. I had a dream about a staircase with the door at the top that led to nowhere, and water is basically in almost all of my dreams, so it really shows up throughout my work. And I created this world, captured it from 4 different angles, and like bang, this was the starting point for me. And yeah, it was just, it accomplished exactly what I had hoped it would accomplish. So then I started making a lot, and this is actually what my studio looked like 2 weeks after I made that first 4. And I had a great professor at the time, and he gave me a great piece of advice, which was like, you've done it. You've had an amazing idea. Now you just need to make so much stuff. Like, he was like, you just got to be a machine. You just have to keep creating, just run with it. And that was really great advice for me at the time. Like, I had learned through that painting that I had showed earlier that working iteratively is important for me, but in this project, I still felt a little bit timid and intimidated in the creating process because I had worked on the concept for so long that like starting to actually create was daunting to me. But once I got going, I was just like making so much. And yeah, a lot of it, wasn't that awesome, but some of it was. And this was a very important time for me of just like learning through making. And here are two things that I actually made during that time, like within 3 weeks of starting this rendering process, that I still use today, and I am very proud of them. And like the one on the left is actually the image on my card, like my business card. So this learning through making was very, very important for me. I also got into animating. This was trickier than I anticipated it to be because a still image lacks a lot of information. It lacks context. It's just like a dream. A moving image provides a lot more information, and so I was trying to find a way to show a moving image, but also to give the feeling of like feeling out of context, not having all the information, and things like that. Oops, sorry. Okay, currently I'm still making work based on my dreams, still using the same process. It's just a little bit more, I don't know, sophisticated now. These are some things I've been working on lately. In regards to the repetition of motifs, like this chair here at this conference table also shows up here. But I'm still creating these mini worlds combining various motifs, just trying to create more complex worlds. And I really do want it to feel like a world and not just feel like an image. So that's what I've been working on lately. Water is still very important, still shows up in everything. And also I've gotten to understand that even though dreams are very fast paced, they do have slow moments too, and sometimes the stillness is scary and sometimes the stillness is serene, and trying to capture like that complex part of dreaming reality and normal reality, in addition to like the fast paced action packed parts. Okay, so now that I've gone through my whole process and my work, we can talk about how I do that with Bitbird. And specifically, we're going to be talking about the work I made with Nikita the Wicked. So Nikita came to me because he was about to release 3 singles in a row, and he wanted them to be like a trilogy, a package. And visually that needed to be communicated as well with the cover artwork and yeah. So I got on a call with him and we talked about, what he was imagining for, obviously I listened to the songs, but also, what he was imagining when he was creating the songs, what he was imagining the visuals to be, how he wanted to communicate like the 3 works all together and things like that. And yeah, so basically some of the notes I took in our first meeting to talk about his first single of this series, 1992, was that he titled the song 1992 because it was the year his parents moved or immigrated from the Soviet Union. And so we got to talking about his childhood, like, Russian household and things like that. And he told me that he used to watch this cartoon that was like the Russian version of Winnie the Pooh. And he sent me a YouTube video. The visuals of this show were actually so awesome. I took some screenshots of my favorite moments. And I thought if I could create, a world like this in my style to make it a bit more adult or a bit more Nikita the Wicked, it would work for the 1992 cover. So I had these two works, and I thought that, I could take the paths and this like bumpy ground and these flowers and trees and things like that. I thought I could take that, create them in the style of these works, which Nikita had told me, like we talked about, work I've made that he liked. He told me he liked these. So that was the original plan. I started off with these, which, Nikita and I were still getting to know each other, and we had just started working together. I now understand, like, I would not make something like this for him, but it was a good place to start. It was a good conversation starter. But, he's Nikita the Wicked, like, need to be a little bit more ominous. So we ended up with this, and this really set the tone for the other two, obviously, since they all were going to be connected. And specifically the color palette set the tone of the red, purple, and blue, which Nikita told me he wanted to be incorporated. And I added the water also to kind of show it's this Happyville, Winnie the Pooh type environment with these cartoon flowers. And there is something looming over, but la la la, kind of. So that was the vibe for 1992. And then this was the animation that we made to go along with it as well for YouTube and then also for Spotify. So then there was Freak. That was the next single that came out. Similar process. I started with this. It was a little bit too literal in terms of how similar it was to 1992. Like, the color palette was very similar. Everything about it was very similar. So I ended up changing it, like working with Nikita on it. And the main thing that I did, obviously I changed the background to be red, and then I changed the figures to be, instead of being red, like this kind of like candy apple, let's see, like this candy apple, like plasticky red, they're just a completely reflective metal surface. So when the background is red, they're red, but you can still see that blue shining through. And that, I think this communicated, what Nikita was looking for so much better. Oh, sorry, I just saw someone said in the chat, these animations need a lot of processing power. Yes, they definitely do. I'm gonna, actually, in this next cover, I'm gonna go through my entire like technical process of putting it together. But working in Maya is a heavy application, and at the end you have to render the entire image, and rendering is really annoying. And I have just like a MacBook Pro, the new MacBook Pro, but it's just a laptop, and it can do everything I wanted to. It animates everything. It animates water. The reason why I didn't go through the technical process on 1992 is because the water really slows down Maya, really slows down my computer, and it's just like complicated. But I definitely recommend having patience, first of all, with this. Like, I always render when I'm sleeping. I always start to render when I'm sleeping, or if I'm about to like go work out or something and won't be on my computer for a few hours. But if you don't have if you have like a MacBook Air or something, I would not recommend rendering on it. You can create in it. You can create anything. But you just can't render on it, because that will probably crash. Like, Maya will crash. I don't think it'll like damage your computer. Don't quote me on that, but like it just like won't work. So yeah. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about the last single, which was Death to Pop. And the name of the song, it's Death to Pop. It's about how Nikita works best when he's working like experimentally, and the song itself gets more experimental as it goes on. And I just thought it was such an awesome concept. I thought it was such a great like wrap up to the three. And so I'm gonna show a bit on how I put that together. So we're gonna go back to my Maya. We can delete these little shapes that we made. And we can look at how I put this whole thing together. So obviously this was the third out of the 3 singles, needed to go with the other 2. So the first thing I did is I brought in the like bumpy landscape that I had used in the first 2. So I actually think I left them the same colors as they were in Freak. Or you know what, I might have made them more blue. But you know, similar dark blue, navy, purple. And the way you make, or I made these blobs is exactly as we had talked before of polymodeling, of just like, you know, having a sphere and taking an edge or something and like moving it around and then ending up with some wacky shape. That's basically how I got all these blobs together. I just made a million of them, put them all together to create this little like nest, because I had this idea of importing a record player to show like it's almost like the TV was like the creepy like ominous thing in Freak. And so we had like the TV in 1992 because we were referencing, you know, Winnie the Pooh cartoon. And so we're talking about the death to pop, we're talking about like technology, we're talking about electronic music. I just felt that a record player was like kind of the right motif here. The other thing is that I'm going to show how I organize all my files, which is that I had made a record player before, way back in the day when I had made an animation in that room, like the model of my room that got me started on all this. So I could just go grab that, and I didn't exactly use it, but I could start with it and then keep building from that. And that is why working digitally is so awesome, because you can just make things once and then use them. So basically I have a whole Maya project called Models, and inside Models is where I keep like all of the things that I was talking about. Like I have an object and then I make a model of it, and then I combine the models together to create the universe. All of the models themselves live alone in this folder, and there's a million more on my external hard drive. But if I ever need a diving board, there's a diving board. If I ever need a TV, there's a TV. If I ever need a door, you know, all these things, it's basically like I'm building my own like AI library that I can draw from, except I've made them because I do prefer to make them, and I prefer to make them from my like understanding and not use reference images, because that is how dreams work. You're just like creating things in your mind. So I had on my external hard drive this record player. So I did go and I grabbed it and I added it to my Death to Pop folder. So all I have to do is just grab record player and import. And there it is. So here's the record player I had made for the project before. It had like this turquoise button, red button, yellow thing. Like, honestly, I modeled this so well. I did such a good job. This was back when I was like being really meticulous. But I did not like the record itself. I felt it was a little bit like too reductive. It's basically just a sphere, or sorry, not a sphere, a disc. So I did end up making a new record for it, which I will show. So this is the new one I made. I'm going to delete the old one. And the new one I made, I spent a lot more time on. I, put the ridges in to show the separate songs, and then also the smaller ridges in between, just as a record has. And then I left room for the label. And I figured, there on the label is where I could show, like, this is a Nikita the Wicked song. And then, I needed to place it onto my record player. So I did just that. And then here you can see, like, okay, I need to have it lined up on the top. I need to have it lined up on the side. And this is where working 3D on a two-dimensional plane becomes a little bit tricky, but I recommend looking at it from all angles like this. It really helps me. Yeah, so this is what we ended up with. I'm actually just going to show, I'm going to hide this one and this one, and now I'm just going to show, oh, you know what? Actually, never mind. I'm going to show these first. Sorry. So now it was time for me to add some color and texture to this record player. So when I'm texturing things, I always have the render view open, because everything looks like really not the color that it is when you're just looking in the normal view. And also you can't see anything unless you have lights on. So I'm just adding a dome light, which is just a huge circle of white light. And so we can just see what this would look like on a white background. So these like bright buttons and everything, it just wasn't the vibe for Nikita the Wicked. And so I already had made the vinyl. I made it the texture of vinyl. There's like an automatic option for textures on Maya called car paint. So I did that. And then I also took like the PNG of the picture for the cover for Freak, and I put that as the label to show that this is a Nikita the Wicked album. And the ridges just turned out so good. Yeah, this one, like, I'm proud of this. But basically what you're doing when you're adding a texture, you're adding a color to a 3D model, is it's like you are wrapping a car. Like you're taking something and you're just like around it. So you have to come up with the material, the color, everything. So building off of everything from before, the Freak cover, the 1992 cover, the 1992 cover had the figures being red. The Freak cover had the figures being metallic but reflected so that they were red. So I decided to carry that metallic over, but maybe not involve the red this time. So the texture I decided to end up doing was same metallic, extremely reflective. So I am using Arnold. It's just a Maya extension for free. And basically what I'm going to do is the easiest thing you can do. I mean, you can make, actually, hold on, I'm going to call this metal. But you can make it any color you want. You can make it blue, whatever. You can like do crazy things. But I just wanted it to be white or gray. And I'm just going to turn up the metalness all the way. And now it's completely reflective. So you can see the difference between this super reflective shiny object here and this matte object down here, even though they're the same color. Here you can also, you can change like how it reflects light. Like now, instead of reflecting white when it's hit with light, it reflects dark blue. You can change so many things. You can make it, you can't have the metalness all the way, but you can make it like transparent. You can do all these things. So texturing and colors is the most fun part of the process for me by far. I live for it. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that to the rest of the record player as well. I'm gonna do assign existing material and bang. So now this is what the record player looks like. It's super shiny, it's super metal, it looks very like futuristic. It's exactly what I wanted. So now I'm gonna show, I'm just gonna hide this, and I'm gonna show how I had it land onto the little bed of like landscape mountain. I need to come up with like a good word for what they are. But now you'll see the entire record player is black on here, and that's because of the metal attribute. So you really do need to look at it through the render view to understand what it looks like. So then I needed to bring in the figures that were in 1992 and the figures that were in Freak, and show that motif again. So what I decided to do was to put them in and have them walking around the record, and left a hole, for the needle. And then I thought, okay, let's have more. So basically here I have a group. Also, this thing on the left is called the outliner, and this is like where everything lives. It's like your layers tab or something in Photoshop. Totally cannot emphasize enough labeling things and organizing things. It's really annoying, but it's so worth it, especially when you're like me and you're taking models from one scene and moving them to another. You're taking things from 2 years ago, you're putting them into a project now, like really important. So I have this outer circle of people here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to center the pivot, which means that this group is now one thing. It's this circle, and then this is the center of that circle. I'm going to click Command D or duplicate, and my computer is going to freak out a little bit. I already have the metal texture put on these already, and once you add the like reflective thing, it slows down a little bit because of the light and everything like that. But so now I have 2 of these. They're just overlapping, but there's 2. And all I'm going to do is take the scale tool and just scale the entire thing down and make them these tinier versions of themselves. But then I didn't want them all walking the same direction. So what I'm going to do is, instead of grabbing the group, if I click the rotate button and I rotate the group, they're just going to move in a circle. But if I expand the group and I grab each figure individually, and then I click the rotate tool, I can rotate them each around to face the other direction. So easy. And then I decided to do that one more time. And I'm just gonna hide this, and I'm gonna show what that finally looked like. So these are like the tiny guys I ended up with at the end. I love the way this turned out with having the different heights. I originally manually like duplicated each one and had them all the same height, but it was like very messy. I didn't really like it. I loved the way this turned out because it adds so much depth. And something that Nikita actually shared with me in our first meeting was that he loves this feeling of like an expanding landscape, like something that feels like it's never ending. And this with like the tiny people, it just like, I don't know, it really worked for me. So let's see what this looks like with the textures. So we just click render again. You see, this is what I was talking about before. Like, rendering is really annoying. and it definitely pushes your computer to its limits. But, oops. Sorry. Here we go. Okay, so everything's metal now. Everything's super reflective. It's looking great. The only thing is that it is on a stark white background, which is not add any, everything is very out of context here, right? Like it's just floating. So we need to ground it a little bit. So we're gonna add color to the background. So same as with before. First of all, you definitely want to have render view open for this. You should have it open for all texturing, but definitely for this, because whatever you put in the background is going to reflect off of all the metal here. So you can make the light any color, just as we had talked about before. And the record player is basically going to like dissolve into that background because it's so reflective. So we had those three colors of the red, blue, and purple for this the three covers for the three songs. We had a purple background in the first one, we had a red background in the second one. I figured it was time to have a blue background. So I don't like to do a solid color for the reasons I was just talking about, of like lacking context, lacking ground. I like to do a gradient because I don't like to go so far as like adding a ground, like adding a horizon, but I do like to show the depth just through the color. So I wanted it to be blue. We're going to do a little bit simpler colors here just for the sake of time. So I figured, okay, dark blue on the bottom, light blue on the top. That's how you ground it. But I didn't really love, I don't know, it was like too, I don't know, something about this was like off to me. So I ended up switching the two, and I had the dark one on top and then the light one on bottom. And that was working for me. But the only thing is that now it's like, okay, I've put in all this hard work on these guys and this center label and everything, and now it's just all blue. It's just so blue. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna add back some more white light. So I added in these two area lights here that are white, and with all lighting you definitely need to view it in render view, because as you can see, nothing changes in the main view, it only changes on here. So these are just some white lights. I have them coming from multiple angles to specifically illuminate the label and the little guys that I put so much time into, and it just makes the whole thing look so like shiny and like crispy, and just shows that it's actually a reflective surface. I'm actually going to hide this background, and you can see that having just the lights alone, these two lights alone, would illuminate the entire record player because it's so reflective. And then this is the shade of blue that I ended up actually going with. But then it came time to choose. Okay, so I have this whole thing. I can look at it from any angle. I can do anything I want with it. So now I have to become a photographer basically and take a picture of it. So to do that, you are literally, you're creating the object, you're creating the color, you're creating the lights, and now you gotta create the cameras. You're literally just like making a whole universe and then shooting a picture in that universe. So I'm going to create a camera. It's camera 4. And then I'm going to look at camera 4. And so this is what we're looking at right now. This could be the album cover. This could be it. But what we're going to do is we're going to move around. We're going to move the camera a little bit, and like, the depth of like the different sizes of these people, like it makes me so happy. So obviously I played around with a bunch of different things. Like this could have been something, again, this is where working iteratively helps me a lot, because you can just easily make multiple cameras and then go back and look at all the cameras. I can send each camera angle to Nikita and he can tell me what he thinks, and it's just like works out really easily. So then, I'm playing around with it. You can try all these different things out. But I ended up with a few options that I sent to Nikita. I ended up with, this one, which is actually pretty similar to where I just ended up with my camera just now. This one from above. And then the one that we actually landed on was this one. So now what's happening over here with this like 14%, 15%, this is rendering. And right now it's rendering at 25% of the settings that I have it set on. And when it renders at 100%, which I did a 3K square, it took like 5 hours probably, because it's so reflective. The reflectivity really adds a lot of time, which is why water takes a long time, and light in general takes time. And when you add a reflective surface, there's just like more complicated light to render. So yeah, once it did render though, this is what we ended up with, and it just came out like so crispy, and like I love the way the metal turned out. And this is what the three all looked like side by side. So we had the figure turning from red to red and this metal, and then also just the metal. We had the purple, the red, and the blue. We had the same landscape underneath the entire time. We had this like technology flowing throughout it. Kind of went from like a landscape to a landscape with some tech embedded to completely just tech. Yeah, those were the three projects for Nikita, and that was my process in general. And I hope I was able to share some light on like my creative process and working with music. And yeah, thank you guys all so much for coming. I'm gonna go back to just my camera, and thank you so much for bearing with me in my first stream ever. And now I can see the chat again, so thank you everyone who's been chatting along with me. And yeah, thank you guys. Have a great day.